Hey guys, so we're getting started on our first lesson, Intro to Psychology. So what is psychology? Psychology is the study of behaviors and mental processes. Do our feelings always match our behaviors? Think about it. If you call me stupid, I may feel sad inside, but I'm gonna act tough on the outside. So our feelings do not always match our behaviors. So psychology is going to study both the behaviors and the feelings and the mental processes. Psychology is a scientific study. That's why a science teacher is teaching it, of behavior and mental processes. Psychology, psyche means mind, and ology means the study of or field of study. So we are seeing a lot of psychology in the news, especially as it relates to, and some of these are kind of old because it talks about Ebola, but even COVID, when, we are talking a lot about the psychology behind being in quarantine, behind living through a pandemic, all of that kind of stuff. The word crazy is thrown around a lot, and so we're going to leave that term out of our class. Okay, we're not going to say the word crazy. We are going to try and put psychological terms to those things. So that leads us into this. What is real psychology and what is pseudopsychology? So pseudopsychology is phony or unscientific psychology that pretends to be the real thing. Okay, palm reading, tarot cards, crystals, fortune telling. If you've ever watched the show The Mentalist, that guy goes around and pretends to see the future, but really he's just really good at observing human behavior. All of that is not psychology. And you also need to be careful about pop psychology. And pop psychology is super cool new books from some guy who may or may not be a psychologist, who may or may not have actually studied in the field. Maybe they have some new theory about, 7 steps to a better you and foolishness like that. That some of it can be really well based in psychology, and some is just popular garbage that make people feel good. So it's important that what we're going to learn throughout this unit 1 is what is real science, what is real psychology, and what is pop psychology or pseudopsychology. Now, what is the problem with pseudopsychology or pop psychology, especially if it makes you feel good, right? Well, first of all, people believe the fake psychology and miss out on real psychology insights, okay? So one of the things that we'll talk about is confirmation bias. So people tend to pay attention to the things that confirm what they already believe in. That's confirmation bias. And we all do it. And if you see a pseudopsychologist that tends to agree with you, then you're going to believe that over real science, real psychology that you don't believe. Pseudopsychology can also produce a lot of fraud. So there's a lot of people who are either applying for grants and getting money from the government to do psychological work that's not real science. You have people who are putting out books and publishing ideas, and they are defrauding people using psychology or using this pseudo psychology. So it is very important that we figure out what is the real psychology and what is not. And we can't see that any more than in this whole COVID situation. Is COVID real? Is it not real? Well, if you follow science, it's a real life thing. But if you are moving towards your confirmation bias of not thinking that it's real, then you're going to try and find articles of ridiculous people who say it's not real. Now, psychology versus psychiatry. So psychiatry is a medical field. So you have to go through medical school to be a psychiatrist. You are a doctor. You can prescribe medications. Psychiatrists have specialized training in treating mental illness. That is their goal, is to treat mental illness and behavior problems. Psychologist is much more broad, but without the medical background. So these people are going to be your counselors, your therapists, because there are many ways to treat problematic mental and behavioral issues. And some of that is worth using medication, but some of that maybe you just need some life strategies, and psychology is going to help you with that. But they don't just help you, they help schools. They have, school psychologists. They help with education. They help with, family counseling. They work at, the state and local level. Another place psychologists tend to work as marketing departments, and we'll get to that a little later in the year. So what can you do with a psychology degree? Well, if you have a bachelor's degree, you can be a social worker, a caseworker, a therapist, a rehab therapist, a marketing research analyst. So that's a big one. So marketing, 90% of marketing, and marketing means like the ads you see on TV or branding, like you see the Moz brand everywhere. We all wear the Moz brand, all of that. That's all psychology. Right? Media buyer, media planner, that's all just using psychological data to come up with the best way to get people to buy your product or watch your show. And you can also be a teacher with a psychology degree. Now, if you want to get your master's, that's where you're going to dig deeper into specifics. So an addiction counselor, AIDS counselor, career counselor, marriage and family counselors, those people have gotten very specific master's degrees. And then, of course, you can get doctorate degrees as a child psychologist, a clinical psychologist, a forensic psychologist. Those are like the people in the BAU and the FBI that go around and say, well, you're looking for a guy who's 40, who's a loner or whatever. A neuropsychologist, those are super interesting because they study neurons in the brain. And then they take that component and they add it to psychology. It's really very interesting. Now, psychiatric social work, they provide mental health services to individuals with high needs. They perform psychotherapy and diagnose mental illness. You have to have a master's degree in order to do this. And that's about what they make a year, 42. It just really depends. But you are working with individuals with very high needs. Clinical psychologists, these are your guys who study, assess, and treat people with psychological disorders without the use of medical intervention. So these are people that are going to come and say, I need help, but I don't want to, or drug. There's a lot of, personality disorders, for instance. Those, you can't medicate those. There's no medicine out there for those. That is all DBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, different types of therapy. Talk therapy, group therapy, all of that stuff, which would be run by a clinical psychologist. And psychiatry, this is, first of all, big money, but also you have to have an MD. So it is, again, a branch of medicine. So they can definitely use talk therapy, DBT, everything that a psychologist would, but they can also add medications. And a lot of times, the combination of those two is what you need to be successful.